Tonight, a global pact on the future of the planet. Nearly 200 nations agree to phase out fossil fuels for the first time. The historic moment, celebrated by some.
You did it. You delivered.
While others call it a cop-out.
We see a litany of loopholes.
Mixed reaction to Canada's ceasefire call as tensions divide the Liberal caucus.
I do not support an unconditional call for a ceasefire.
I am grateful.
Also, Republicans pushed through an impeachment inquiry against Joe Biden. Plus, Tesla recalls nearly all of its cars on the road over a defect. And a field of dreams for Expos fans.
Maybe he would have been an awesome baseball player.
Imagining what could have been for Tom Brady and Montreal.
That guy just never let us lose.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. Nearly 200 countries have agreed to what's being called a landmark climate deal, offering new hope in the battle against global warming.
Hearing no objection, it is so decided.
The pact reached at the UN Climate Summit in one of the biggest oil-producing regions in the world falls on the heels of Earth's hottest year ever recorded, and for the first time calls for a transition away from fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal, the primary sources of climate change. But the plan, which is not legally binding, does not call for a phase out. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver on who is feeling the heat.
That you did it. You delivered.
After days of tough talks and stalled negotiations, world leaders are leaving COP28 with a climate agreement some worried would never happen.
And many thought it was not in the making. It was simply, with all the geopolitics, all the difficult positions, this was not to be had. And the good news is that humanity did manage to arrive at this.
Overnight, negotiators representing nearly 200 countries came to a historic deal, paving the way for a cleaner climate. The agreement to transition away from fossil fuels in energy systems as to achieve net zero by 2050, to triple the use of renewable energy, and to double energy efficiency.
This has been extremely complex negotiations. We have to remember that for many countries, what we're basically saying is the way you make your living now, you need to change.
The deal is being called the most significant since the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial times. Canada and more than 100 other countries wanted stronger language, specifically the use of the phrase fossil fuel phase-out.
Not as much as I would have wanted, but at least it's there.
While climate experts acknowledge this significant shift in how the world is powered, many feel the agreement panders too much to the world's major oil-producing nations.
We need to expect better of our leaders. It's unfortunate that they continue to be so influenced by the fossil fuel lobby. But this is transformative, so that's why I'm feeling a bit optimistic.
This pact is not legally binding, and some groups fear that loopholes in this agreement could slow down the global transition, Omar, away from fossil fuels.
All right, Andy Bergeron-Oliver in Ottawa, where caucus conflicts are usually dealt with behind closed doors. But Canada's decision to back the UN resolution calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war has exposed a rift among Liberals. And as CTV's Judy Trin reports, some MPs have gone public.
Tensions behind closed doors crack open. The government's support for a non-binding ceasefire is dividing the caucus.
Hamas, which is a terrorist organization that has no obligation to follow international rules, will just do what it did again, and I can't live with that.
Anthony Housefather and former cabinet ministers Marco Mendicino and David Lametti are among the Liberal MPs who say Canada should not have voted for the UN resolution, while MPs who have been lobbying for a ceasefire for weeks welcomed the diplomatic shift.
I'm supporting the ceasefire only to solve and to protect the human life in both sides.
I hope that Canada will rally international support to protect the innocent civilians being killed in Palestine, in Gaza.
Canada voted with nearly 80% of global nations.
We're seeing day after day children, women die. This has to stop.
And broke with tradition, voting against the U.S. and Israel.
The UN resolution, in my opinion, fell short in the following ways. It did not condemn Hamas to the extent I think is necessary and legitimate.
From outside and inside his own party, the Prime Minister is under tremendous pressure.
It is simply hard for leaders to fend off those on both sides that want the political reaction to somehow favor them.
Today, Trudeau did not address the tensions, but called for a ceasefire and condemned Hamas.
We're going to keep participating in urgent international efforts towards a sustainable ceasefire, but it cannot be one-sided. We need to see Hamas lay down its arms. We need to see it release all hostages.
The Prime Minister says Hamas has no future role in governance and says that Canada will help work towards a two-state solution for Israelis and Palestinians. Omar.
All right, Judy, thank you. Israel's prime minister acknowledged the international pressure his country is facing, but vowed to press on with his campaign against Hamas today. While in Gaza, floods are adding to the misery, and dirty water has become a breeding ground for disease. CTV's Heather Wright reports.
Heavy rain flooded streets in Gaza overnight, worsening the already dire conditions in the enclave. The United Nations says half of Gaza's population is now living in Rafah, near the border with Egypt, where acute respiratory infections, lice, scabies, and other diseases are spreading rapidly.
People lining up for hours just to get to a toilet, one toilet available for hundreds of people. You can imagine what the sanitation conditions are like.
In the north, fighting continued the day after the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. Speaking to soldiers over the radio, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to keep fighting while acknowledging the calls to stop. I say this in the face of international pressure. Nothing will stop us. We will go to the end. Tuesday was one of the bloodiest days for the Israeli military since this war began. 10 soldiers were killed, 9 of them during an ambush in Shujaa, after coming under fire from fighters inside an apartment building. 4 kilometers north of there, in Jabalia, some people returned to inspect the damage to their homes, the area all but destroyed. While in Rafah, families said goodbye to their loved ones and combed through the rubble left by an airstrike. This is unjust, says Abu Ahmed al-Najjar. Why can't they give us some warning? Today marks 68 days of captivity for the hostages who remain in Gaza. Their family members rallied outside Israel's parliament, the Knesset, urging their government to do more to bring them home.
There is no time left, and that every day that passes by might be the last day.
The Israeli military was asked today about reports they have begun flooding the Gaza tunnels with seawater. The IDF would only say they are using a wide range of creative means to damage the tunnels. Omar.
Heather Wright in Toronto. Canada's ambassador to the United Nations was asked today about some comments he made while his mic was still hot. Take a listen to what Bob Rae says at the end of his speech.
Living side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Canada. I now give a floor to distinguished representative of Iceland.
See how that flies?
See how that flies is what was said. And here's the explanation.
I was talking to 2 of my colleagues who had been working with me on the speech. I wouldn't read anything into it more than that. I mean, it's not a big deal. I know some people will want to make it a big deal.
Rae says the UN speech was carefully considered between his office and Ottawa. The Republican-controlled House of Representatives has authorized an impeachment inquiry into U.S. President Joe Biden. The vote gives formal approval to an investigation Republicans have been conducting for months, tying the probe to the business dealings of the president's son, Hunter. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbin on what it all means heading into a presidential election year.
The president's son came to Capitol Hill ready to testify, but refused to do so behind closed doors as Republicans demanded.
And in the depths of my addiction, I was extremely irresponsible with my finances. But to suggest that is grounds for an impeachment inquiry is beyond the absurd. There is no evidence to support the allegations that my father was financially involved in my business, because it did not happen.
Voting tonight
to continue their ongoing investigations, to exercise its constitutional power to impeach Joseph Biden.
House Republicans formalize what they've been doing for a year now.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Despite no evidence of high crimes or misdemeanors, Republicans insist Joe Biden profited off his son Hunter's foreign business dealings.
Joe Biden knew of, participated in, and benefited from his family cashing in on the Biden name around the world.
Democrats say there's no smoking gun here. It's personal, a political stunt to hurt the president in a tough election year.
I get it. They're upset Donald Trump lost. Some of them still don't believe he lost. Many of them are upset that his violent insurrection did not succeed on January 6th. And today they want to finish the job.
The president, now facing an impeachment inquiry, said tonight that instead of helping make American lives better, Republicans are attacking him with lies. Omar?
CTV's Joy Melvin in Washington tonight. Joy, thanks. Only hours after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's pleas to U.S. lawmakers for more military aid, Kyiv was hit early today by a Russian missile attack. At least 53 people were injured after explosions rocked the capital. Ukraine's military says its air defenses intercepted all of the ballistic missiles, but debris hit homes and a children's hospital. Back here at home, hospitals are sounding the alarm across the country as respiratory virus cases are overwhelming emergency rooms. And now sick people are being asked to skip holiday plans. Here's CTV's Kevin Gallagher.
The wave of COVID, flu, and RSV is pushing hospitals to the brink.
Preparing for about 120% occupancy.
Officials in Kingston, Ontario say its health system is bursting at the seams. Inside Kingston General, 3-month-old Evie Clark struggles to breathe. The infant has RSV.
My biggest concerns is her getting worse in her lungs. She's already struggling.
A severe rise in RSV is impacting children in other provinces too. Combined with rising cases of COVID, the Alberta Medical Association says surgeries and even chemotherapy treatments are being postponed.
The waits will be really long. You may get all your care in a hallway or in our ambulance bay.
This crisis comes as Alberta restructures its healthcare system. Premier Danielle Smith says no patients are being turned away. Staffing shortages combined with the rash of respiratory illness are affecting hospital wait times across the country. One of the worst, the Montfort Hospital in Ottawa, where some patients waited more than 20 hours to be assessed by a physician today.
It's more the chronic conditions that, unfortunately, because of where we are in our healthcare system now, there are longer wait times.
Doctors are asking people to wash their hands, consider wearing masks in crowded indoor places, stay home when they're sick, and get vaccinated.
People over the age of 65, only about 40% of those individuals have received a COVID-19 vaccine in the last 6 months. If you look at who's hospitalized with COVID-19, it's overwhelmingly people over the age of 65.
Public health officials warn Canada has not reached the peak of COVID, flu, and RSV cases. So an already dire situation in hospitals, Omar, could grow worse.
All right, Kevin, thanks. RCMP in Saskatchewan raising the red flag on an emerging new threat in the ongoing opioid crisis. Fentanyl has increasingly been laced with a powerful animal tranquilizer that appears to resist naloxone, the medication that reverses drug overdoses. Here's CTV's Allison Bamford.
It can happen to anyone.
Ann Doig lost 3 family members to drug poisonings in the first 6 months of the year. Her 16-month-old granddaughter, then her son, and later on his partner.
Drug use and drug addiction and drug poisoning is no respecter of who you are.
Doig, a former president of the Canadian Medical Association, says all 3 toxicology reports found a combination of drugs, including fentanyl and benzodiazepines, in their systems, a mixture gaining ground across Western Canada.
The real problem is that the drugs that are on the street now are something that our society has never seen before.
Saskatchewan RCMP issued a warning late Tuesday of an increase in fentanyl mixed with benzodiazepines and xylazine, a powerful animal tranquilizer used in veterinary medicine. The combination is circulating across the southern part of the province. Mounties call this strain particularly alarming because it doesn't look any different than others. But if users experience an overdose, it may be irreversible.
It's always been dangerous, even when fentanyl wasn't on the streets, but it's on a whole new level now.
This harm reduction site in Regina tests the composition of street drugs for clients. It first detected the combo this spring, but has seen a resurgence in the last few months.
People are going to use drugs. We can't stop that regardless. I think it's safer for somebody to know what they're using and know that it's not contaminated with something that they're not used to using.
RCMP say the drug mixture already in BC, Alberta, and Manitoba is likely to continue spreading. A similar situation south of the border. Stats from the CDC show about 11% of drug toxicity deaths in the U.S. involve xylazine. Omar?
All right, Ellison, thank you. Coming up, Tesla's massive cross-border recall.
A lot of drivers think it is fully autonomous.
The concerns over the autopilot function. Plus, Oprah honored by one of America's most famous museums. Tesla has issued its largest ever recall after an investigation into crashes found a potential safety issue. 2 million cars in the U.S. and nearly 200,000 here in Canada, all of them manufactured in the last 11 years. But if you drive a Tesla, you don't need to bring it in to a dealership for the fix. CTV's Bill Fortier explains.
Yeah, cool. Amadeus Peruk has been driving a Tesla since last spring.
I've always wanted one ever since they came out.
He commutes from outside Edmonton, so the autopilot setting is a nice option.
I'm not doing any of this. No, I've got no foot on the pedal, no hands on the wheel.
That function is behind a recall after a U.S. study into 11 Tesla crashes over 2 years, some of them with emergency vehicles, a few of them fatal. In each, autopilot was engaged. According to the recall, the prominence and scope of the feature's controls may not be sufficient to prevent driver misuse.
A lot of drivers think it is fully autonomous. It is not a fully autonomous vehicle.
This automotive journalist says the recall is basically fine-tuning the technology so it's more clear what it can and cannot do.
I think a lot of consumers just got a little bit lazy and comfortable with it and thought that they could get away with just letting the vehicle drive themselves, but that's not what it's intended to do.
If you're using it the way it's intended and in the responsible way, it's one of the safest vehicles I've ever owned.
Peruk shows us how the current autopilot works.
The car is braking on its own.
It's a combination of adaptive cruise control and steer assist.
You still need to make sure that your hands are close to the wheel.
Every now and then, the car makes sure you're still paying attention and in control.
It's flashing up here. Apply slight turning force.
Like around 2.2 million cars, Amadeus Peruk's Tesla will now get a system update. He says no matter how much safer it is, he'll always use it carefully.
It's the future, so gotta embrace it somehow, right?
In this case, the fix is a simple one, an automatic download, what Tesla's calling a software remedy, with more controls and alerts designed to encourage the driver to stay in control at all times. Bill Fortier, CTV News, Edmonton.
Still ahead, racing to class.
I am Skinny Santa.
A surprise holiday helper spreading cheer. A prestigious collection at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery in Washington has a striking new addition tonight. A 2-meter-tall painting of Oprah, unveiled by the media mogul herself.
Abraham Lincoln and Ida B. Wells, Michelle and Barack Obama, Lena Horne, John F. Kennedy, Oprah Winfrey.
Winfrey is wearing purple in the image, a color she calls seminal in her life because of the 1985 film The Color Purple that launched her illustrious career and for which she received a Best Supporting Actress Oscar nomination. A former U.S. president has a new gig, well, sort of, and it requires knowing how to read the room. That's Barack Obama bringing the holiday spirit to a classroom of young children. He surprised them with Christmas gifts and led clearly a pretty playful story time. One of Santa's most well-known helpers. After the break, a storied career reimagined.
It was because of his hitting. 649 home runs. What a power hitter.
Dreaming up a world where Tom Brady takes his talents to the Montreal Expos. Here's a question. What if one of the world's greatest sports figures ever chose baseball over football? Well, we never got to see Tom Brady try his hand on the diamond. We got a glimpse of how that reality could have played out in a dream scenario. And it takes Montreal Expos fans on a trip down memory lane. Here's CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin.
You know why Tom Brady won 7 rings?
This Montreal brasserie stands as a shrine to Expos catcher Tom Brady.
649 home runs. What a power hitter.
Okay, this is an alternate reality, courtesy of an ad for American trading cards company Topps. That career behind the plate, though, is not entirely far-fetched. Quarterback winner of 7 Super Bowls was, in real life, drafted by the Expos in 1995.
Hey, what a game.
He declined and went on to great things. But when the NFL legend posted the ad online this week, he threw Montreal baseball fans into a series of what-ifs.
They would have moved us out of Montreal.
Expos superfan Perry Giannis applauded this bittersweet, nostalgic moment.
I'd like to blow it off and say, you know what, I don't think he would have amounted to anything, but nobody thought he would amount to much as an NFL quarterback. So it's an interesting question. Who knows? Maybe he would have been an awesome baseball player.
Come on down to Brady Auto.
Brady is a sales pitch guy for cars in the spoof, but the Expos also never left Montreal. In reality, Nos Amours, as they were so affectionately called, moved on to Washington in 2004, breaking many hearts.
That guy just never let us lose.
Could have been teammates Vladimir Guerrero, Pedro Martinez, and Larry Walker have a cameo. The Baseball Hall of Fame joined in the online fun, and so did fellow former New York Giants quarterback Eli Manning, turned San Francisco Giants baseball player.
You're a Montreal legend. Personally, my favorite moments were those Giants championships.
At the end of the ad, it all turns out this was just Brady's dream, all playing out on a field of dreams. And now this has fanned the flames for those still dreaming of an Expos comeback in this city. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
And that's a snapshot of this Wednesday. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. And to all those celebrating, Salgaram Mubarak. Good night.